Hey, so obviously a lot of you might have seen this video, the EsperC's State of NA East, Adrenaline, August 24th. Uh, I'm Arelite, Guild Leader of Dragon, and this was put on the radar for me, and I thought I'd do a response video, kind of shedding some light on it, giving my insights, or seeing what I agree with, what I don't agree with, and how this kind of panned out, and what is relevant, what and not relevant. So let's get into it.
Okay, now with I believe about a little over a week of the player created server merge on Adrenaline, we have some data, and ahead of the Alliance Committee meeting headed tonight, I decided to make this video. This is EsperC's State of the Guilds NA East, August 24, 2025. I'll be doing some power rankings. My current take on Adrenaline and problems I see headed into both September 3rd and the tier 3 release on September 18th.
Okay, so just before he goes into it, in case it's not aware, SVC is not part of this leadership Discord, and whatever information he has or does gain is, again, hearsay. It's from third party. A lot of times during conversations, as many of you guys can know, everyone has their own interpretation or take on things. There are things that maybe are not brought up or clarified, things that people might have issues with, and they don't discuss it, and then um, anyone who's then going to talk to EsperC about things is either usually disgruntled or maybe, they were unhappy with a certain resolution. And so he's only going to get bits and pieces of it. It's just natural, humans interaction. You're going to talk about things that you're mad about, you're upset about, or angry about. Less often you're going to go to somebody and say, hey, do you want to hear about this amazing thing that's going on? It's just not so much happens. So I take a lot of it with a grain of salt. But let's hear what he has to say about Adrenaline Super Server.
Okay, for those who don't know, there's a super secret Discord. I have a super committee of guild leaders led by Funk Monk from Exodus. The intent is to create a balanced intra or inside server with periodic reevaluation of alliances. I'm not going to disclose all the rules and terms, but some of them include no poaching, and one alliance winning Nebula more than 2 times leads to re-examination.
I'm just going to pause it there to discuss. There's no, I think he's misconstrued it. There's no, oh, if an alliance wins Nebula more than 2 times, there's re-examination. I think there's straight out false. There's nothing written like that, nor was there anything verbally said. I mean, my guild has won Nebula more than 2 times. Other alliances have won Nebula more than 2 times. I think it's ridiculous. It's going to happen over time that an alliance. I mean, there's 7 days in a week, right? No matter what, like no matter which way you spin it, if there's 4 alliances, one of them, or most of them, are going to win at least 2 times during that week. So this is just flat incorrect. I assume he meant maybe 2 times in a row, but even then, there's no rules against that. And poaching, kind of half correct. The no poaching was kind of introduced, if you can imagine, there's 4 alliances, 16 guilds. If there exists a server that has, an Exodus or another competitive guild, often than not, a lot of players will become like disgruntled with the kind of the inner workings of their guild, or if they're losing GVG, and look to move up to a more successful guild and kind of take a more an easy way out. The no poaching is in place to prevent the kind of brain drain transfer of players from weaker guilds into stronger guilds, where then those weaker guilds are not benefiting from being in alliance or staying on the server. So it's to kind of keep that in check. What we do is we discuss with the players, anyone that applies, we tell them, hey, whatever issue that you're having, first bring it up to your leadership and see if you can get it worked out. A lot of times what happens is, players are disgruntled about the way loot was distributed, or somebody said a mean word to them and now they just want to leave and apply elsewhere. And I don't, myself and many others don't want a situation where, guild leaders are just jumping on that and eating up a bunch of players, when we could go to a solution where problems are resolved. I myself have been in many of those conversations where players apply, and I kind of figure out, hey, what's going on? What issues do you have? I've reached out to the leaderships and said, hey, has this person spoken to you? Sometimes it's a yes, like they've spoken to us and we've resolved it. Sometimes it's like, no, I didn't hear about anything. So, I tell them, hey, I'm going to speak to your leadership. and we kind of resolve it. And if the issues can't be resolved, or the leadership is perfectly okay saying that they're not a bad player, there's just difference in opinions. Like some players want their loot rules to be a certain way, and it just doesn't line up, or their priorities. For example, in my own guild, I had players who are very much interested in guild events and open world PvP, and our guild is like much more structured around like war games and Riftstone and large scale PvP, and so you won't have as many players online during the early mornings for that. And they expressed that desire to me and wanted to go to a guild that then facilitated for that. So guilds like Jail or Gravity, and that was perfectly okay with me. And I think those things are healthy and should be supported. It's just you shouldn't have a scenario where a guild like Dragon or a guild like Exodus exists on a server, and they just start taking all of your best players because they're currently doing the best in GVG, right? Part of the reason why we have stronger guilds with weaker guilds in the same alliance is so that the stronger guilds that do lead the alliances can then teach the some of the weaker guilds how to kind of conduct PvP so that they can build with the players that they currently have. So, yeah, I'll continue.
In my opinion, both rules already breached, but this is my personal opinion. I believe this is good intentions, but the server is rapidly deteriorating to two-party status. You will see what I mean as I further discuss this video. But anyways, without further ado, I think what people want to know is the power.
So I just want to say, at this point, when he made the video, he said a two-party status. I think that's just factually incorrect. Dragon itself, which he goes on to name, I think later on, was losing every single arc boss. We didn't even make it to the top 5 for a long period of time, even when we were allied with Infamy, even before we were allied Infamy with Jailed, Gravity, and the rest of them. And this was just like maybe people's priorities are different. Dragon was great at winning Nebula just because we had high attendance and that's what we focused on. A lot of guilds didn't put CTAs for Nebula, but I don't think it's fair to say like a two-party status when I saw every single alliance on the board and winning arc boss, which is usually the premium, the main focus for a lot of guilds that they CTA for, right? So I think if you're going to be fair about it, you judge it on what kind of events do the guilds put an emphasis on. If you're talking about guild events or open world PvP, Dragon Alliance and Exodus Alliance was not showing up any of those, and definitely weren't dominating that. You'd put nighttime chests. People are preparing for T3, trying to get their tokens. Our alliance were winning those, and then even arc boss we were losing a lot of the time as well. So just, I don't think it's fair to say that a server's alliance strength balance is just dictated solely by Nebula. So I continue.
Rankings, so let's get started on that.
More sports.
I'm just gonna skip this little announcement part, but here we go.
Exodus, what a surprise! Okay, everyone knows Exodus. You can check I don't want to copy strike myself. Copyright Exodus, one and only. Check Sovereign's post-tournament video for their background. I think most people viewing it should know who they are. Recent GVG results, they just beat Dragon or Dagon Riftstone. They beat Wolves twice in a row in Wargame. And they lost versus Curse the Wargame that former Take Care members have accused Exodus of throwing. I did not personally see that Wargame. I don't have a personal opinion on that. Who the hell knows what actually happened?
So I'm not gonna obviously spend all the time just like playing out Esper's video. I think if you want to see the content and what he says about Exodus and each of the guilds, then you can watch his video and I'll direct to that. What I will say is I think Exodus definitely for sure is #1 power ranking, but I think people misunderstand how these like rankings work. Exodus is not just #1, but they are leagues above the competition. They are not just one step above whoever's in second place. There is a noticeable canyon gap between first and second place. That is mainly because the quality of players that they have, it is from the original, top 4 guilds in the game, Tier, Exodus, Hallowing, and some sample players, etc. in there. Well, that kind of makes a really powerful stack that if any guild goes against Exodus in GVG, usually will lose, especially in open world. Now, they did obviously lose that war game against Curse, but, very close game, and in war games, anything can happen with, like, when it comes to flipping caps, and players can get kind of caught up in themselves and farming kills and chasing for kills. So I don't think it has any relevance, especially beyond that. Talking about today, they did have rematches and it wasn't even close. Leading to before this loss against Curse, I believe Exodus had a game in which their kills compared to Curse was like a ratio of like 5-1. So should just go to show like a testament to how powerful Exodus is. Now, this doesn't make Exodus an unbeatable behemoth. They had inter-server siege where it was Exodus, Infamy, Spooky, and Serenity up against Jailed, Gravity, Dragon, and I can't remember the fourth guild at the time. But lo and behold, Exodus actually lost that inter-server siege and quite. Quite solid. It was a quite solid game, and they are not unbeatable when it comes to large scale PvP. However, it would be very hard to beat them in a head to head. But I digress. I mean, it makes sense for them to be a lead of a alliance. But we'll fast forward a little bit to the point in which he goes to number 2.
DMV on Saturday morning. The lines. My comparison is Take Care Hydra. I mean, they have several TC members at this point. And I mean, I think the Dragon is the consensus number 2 guild, kind of how people thought that TC was maybe, the number 2 outside of the tier alliance. And also when they were allied with Exodus.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pause it because that's what yaps about a little bit of the history. I would say I do believe Dragon is the number 2 consensus. I don't believe it's the case of the individual players. I think Dragon excels extremely well in large scale PvP through the kind of split decision macro calls and how we adapt to unforeseen circumstances. I think some guilds are very slow when they're hit with something that they're not prepared for. I think Dragon's strong suit. You'll notice that if myself, the shockcaller, is not there with Dragon on that day, Dragon can look like a completely different entity and lose against a guild that they shouldn't be losing against. I would say that for individual player to player, guilds like Cursed have very, very strong spell blades and clump damage and main ball PvP. I think if you were to put it head to head, even guilds like Jailed and Gravity, if they have a strong enough front line and good direction and leadership, can wipe Dragon and have wiped Dragon multiple times in Nebula and Arc Boss PvP when 2 balls are going into each other head to head. So, but I mean, in the GVG scenario, if the shock callers are there, I think Dragon does come out on top, but that's just because a lot of guilds do lack the leadership. I think the comparison to Take Care Hydra is incorrect. I think TC's main strong suit was when they could cycle the double Devos and they played the 2-2-2 comps extremely well. I don't think Dragon has that same setup, and I think that the tank side of Dragon is on the weaker side, and this is maybe be explained a bit too much, but I'd say the best comparison is comparing Dragon to a guild such as Helloing or Nihowing, depending on which one you want to refer to, but they have incredibly strong kill squads, but they do lack on some of the other areas, so I don't think this comparison is right. And that can those kind of weaknesses can be exposed in GVGs or large scale PvP. You see a scenario where Dragon played against Wars of War on the Peculiar Riftstone. Wars of War's 20 plus tanks had much stronger showing in that scenario where the kill squads can't be as effective. We did obviously rematch and change some of the strategies going into that, leading to a better result. Doesn't matter if it was like 40-ish members that showing up. I'm pretty sure if you put Exodus 40-ish members, 47, 48 in that same scenario, they would have won on that day. So doesn't really matter. I will continue address some of these things.
At one point, recent Dragon GVG results. We already talked about they lost the first Exodus. They beat Gravity previously on Daigon. I'll take that at face value. I wasn't actually there. This is just secondhand.
I mean, I'll point to how this happens quite a bit with Esper does repeat this a few times throughout the video that he wasn't there and he hears things from secondhand information, which is quite important when kind of evaluating how correct and true some of these points are.
This is another elephant in the room. It kind of reminds me of the supple versus tier dynamic. What do you do with the consensus number 1 and number 2 alliance leaders or guilds left in the game? Dragons equally as so much Exodus creating a server dynamic where people just want to play with them or line up to join them. And similarly to Exodus, they also have their own DMV waiting line. I believe that this is one of the biggest problems Adrenaline has. There's such a big gap between the number 1 and number 2 guilds and the rest of the server. I'm going to be very blunt about this. This is a huge problem.
I'm going to pause him and say I partially agree with that. I think both Exodus and Dragon have been beneficiaries of having large amounts of players, apply to their guilds and want to join so that they can, like, those players can be in a competitive guild near the top. I will say, however, when that doesn't mean that there's quality players. I think players who are just trying to chase a quick win are not the people that you want in your guild anyways. If I see a player who was in a guild that was going through the highs and the lows and they just want to jump ship immediately, my question then is like, okay, well, they might do that to me when we start having some losses, right? So they're not even quality players, so why even discuss it? That being said, again, to my previous point, other guilds have lots of other things to offer depending on the content of the game. Exodus only CTAs for like maybe 3 Nebula bosses a week. A lot of them raid log. The tier players in Exodus often play BDO, so they're not on most of the time. If you want a guild that is very community driven, you want people that you can hang out with for a long time on Discord, or active all throughout the day into the night to do like raids with and to kind of do open world content, then guilds like Gravity, guilds like Jill, Walls of War are much better candidates for that. And so I think that's something Esper neglects or doesn't really see the value in that, people don't just play the game to only join the strongest guild. Some people play the game for community reasons, right? And quite frankly, like I've played a number of MMOs where I didn't need to be in the number 1 guild or number 2 guild, number 3 guild. I was fine as long as I had other people to play with who are around as often as I would, and that would be way more enjoyable, So I think people have to kind of figure out what do they care about in the game and what guild gives them those resources. Also, if you think about it, once a player has their Arc Boss gear done or has their Nebula accessories done, what value does a guild like Exodus or Dragon provide? Yes, you feel good about winning, but then your guild isn't showing up to nighttime chess, and you're starting to prepare for tier 3, and you want to get those extra unlock zones, you want to run more dungeons. Guilds like Walls of War that show up quite a bit to nighttime PvP start to look a bit more appealing. And so then you have a lot of these players go from these top guilds that just raid log to the more active guilds. So you have to position yourself in a way that is kind of appealing to the right type of players. But I'll continue.
And, number 3 is Cursed. Why is my comparison to Dragon? I think that Cursed has made a very smart decision and holding out and not going to Adrenaline. This is similar to Dragon not inserting themselves into the supple versus tier dynamic on Ivory.
I'm just gonna pause it. He makes a comparison of like Cursed leaving quite early. I mean, they Curse moves off of, I believe, Snowburn. I think that was a logical decision. Lots of guilds moved off at that time. CPQ, Hailstorm. It's understandable. I don't blame any of those transferring at the time. Dragon not going with the supple versus tier situation during the tournament, completely different. Had nothing to do with the health of Dragon. I don't think they're a fair comparison. Dragon just did not want to get involved with making it unbalanced. This was after Oso died. Dragon having, if we had joined the tier alliance at the time, would have made it very uneven, and there's nobody wants to play in a 4 guild versus 3 guild matchup. It's boring, right? Cursed obviously held a vote with their members, and it was a very close vote, but slight majority wanted to stay on to Carnage because they wanted to continue building out their builds and farming, and that's fair. I respect that. I think leadership should always do what the majority of their players wanted. I will say though, that does run the risk of having some of the members who are disgruntled over time, or members who do eventually get their Arc Boss weapons or their Nebula drops. They're going to start to look at other servers with a little glimmer in their eye and say, hey, now that I've gotten my pieces, maybe I want to go to a server that has a more, popping Dominion or has more PvP going on, stone fights, etc. So it's always the plus and minus, right? If you can retain your members, and if Curse can hold their members and they don't look to go elsewhere, then objectively, they make the right decision. That unfortunately isn't the case for a lot of other guilds. The reason why Adrenaline Server was made and the guilds are on here is because some players just don't want to free farm, right? They don't want to get items to then use on nobody, right? So I don't think there's a necessarily right or wrong. It just depends on the type of players that you have in your guild and what they value the most, right? And equally as so, there might be a scenario where some of the players in Curse decide, we are tired of free farming Carnage, we want to go elsewhere, and only time can tell, essentially. So, um, but I will agree that does lead a power vacuum in Adrenaline. It would have been nice to have Curse in Adrenaline leading an alliance, and I think we would have seen more exciting PvP, and a much more balanced dynamic. But power to Curse and their members to decide where they want to go and what they want to do and what they value in the game. So, I will say one thing really quick though. Here is I did hear some players say that Curse members wanted to farm for T3 release. Curse made a decision to stay on Carnage prior to the announcement of T3, so they were completely independent. They did not make that decision for this reason. It was just based on the knowledge that there was more T2 gear that they had to get, or more Arc Boss or Nebula. So you can't use your reasoning retroactively after announcement had been made, like post your vote and poll. So just a little nuance there. We'll continue on. Skip forward.
I think Curse has objectively made the right decision.
I mean, it depends, right? So, Infamy coming to the server, they also, I think, objectively made a good decision to come over. Kept their players entertained. As far as I know, when Infamy landed, their players were ecstatic. They had so much fun just seeing, what the game, you get to play the game as it should be, what it has to offer. No matter where you turn, you see a lot of people, and you see a popping wall chat. It's enjoyable. Gives you more reason to play the game beyond just like raid logging. So, comparison also, Infamy is smart for trying to hug Dragon. I'll be honest, that is questionable kind of explanation about Infamy. Infamy has never tried to hug Dragon. Every guild leader who's been in the conversations has heard Carter say he doesn't mind, where Infamy is put. They don't have to be with Dragon. They can be their own alliance leader. And as you can see right now, Infamy has their own alliance, right? Part of it was that Dragon and Infamy had worked together before, and we our members enjoy playing together in the same way Spooky and Exes play together. Infamy has players who are ex-Dragon, Dragon has players who are ex-Infamy. Happens, right? Like those players want to still connect and play together. And we had some great moments in Siege whenever we did play together. Referring back to the infamous Siege in which we had 2 Hail Marys to take the castle from Hailstorm and Margin at the time. But yeah, I mean, we tried it, and in the effort of keeping things balanced, maybe this happened, I think, post this video, but we split ways and we're just competing against each other now, and it's perfectly fine. I think Esper kind of jumped the gun here, painted Infamy in a negative light, which just wasn't fair because he doesn't know about how the conversations were going. And at the time, all the guild leaders agreed it was fine for Infamy and Dragon to be together because Gerald and Gravity were together, Eggs and Spooky. It just makes sense, and if we have to balance, we're all for it, right? But yeah, is Dragon gonna marry Infamy on September 3rd? Oh, stay tuned and find out. I think all the guilds agreed that we'll do what's best for everybody. It really depends on what guilds are going to stay on Adrenaline and how that'll look like. I can speak on Dragon's behalf. Dragon is perfectly fine if we wanted to do a dynamic of, one really strong guild with like one up-and-coming guild, developing guild. But we're also okay with just, working with Infamy. I'm not going to complain. I really love working with them. And the key point is it's an open conversation. Every party that has some vested interest should give their opinion on what they want to see from the server. If guilds want to go to another server and make 2 competitive servers, I think that's a good idea too. I don't think one server should have 16 guilds or 8 2-guild alliances. I don't think it's conducive. I don't think it's healthy. So I mean, we'll see what happens. Let's skip forward a little bit here.
It's a similar dynamic where Infamy has a shot caller. When Infamy was out of Exodus basically delegated shot calling for the rest of the guilds. like for Spooky and whatever their fourth guild was to Infamy, while Exodus managed on their own. Kata is a perfectly capable shot caller. I also feel like kind of how like also I think wisely chose to ally Supple eventually before retiring before the tournament. Infamy is smart for allying Dragon rather than being alliance leader, the third party alliance leader, for the doomed position or the position that everyone's trying to avoid at the moment.
Again, the reason why I have this was I just disagree with the statement about doomed position everyone trying to avoid. Just recently we saw Wars Alliance win Nebula. We've seen many alliances win Arc Boss as well. I don't know what definition of doomed Esper has, but I think if you're winning open world events, I think if you're winning Arc Boss and you're able to get victories in Nebula, how are you doomed in any way? Just very debatable. I will say a lot of that does come down to, especially for the ZVZ Arc Boss and Nebula, it comes down to having a shot caller, right? I think that's irrefutable. I think if a third or fourth alliance does not have a shot caller, then they're going to run into issues. But my question then is there ever any hope, or do you kind of deserve to win these like prestigious bosses? They're some of the biggest drops in the game. Do you deserve to win them if your guild doesn't have a shot caller? I'm sure every guild should have a shot caller, otherwise you're not very competitive, so to speak. And any singular guild shot caller should be able to expand that out to an alliance. Essentially what you're saying is, whatever instructions you give to your guild, you're then giving it to 4 guilds instead, right? And obviously there's nuance to it. You can assign responsibilities, but even the most basic shot callers can run it for the alliance anyways. But it's just a matter of willingness or desire to. But again, I digress. I think it's just still a silly statement anyways to say.
They're going to hook up and be a permanent tsunami. Now, this will take us a little bit of thought process. This is also not by any means an insult to Ratty. Ratty is a very respected shot caller. The reason why I say this is because for people who may recall, when the server consolidation was announced, I think in February, Tsunami was a guild that kind of bounced around a bit, then found their home creating a 4-stack on Carnix, kind of like how Wolves eventually bounced around transfer servers, and they found their home on Adrenaline after both Helloing and Supple left. During the Ivory Super Server, Tsunami ran into Dragon, ironically, lost to Dragon a couple of times, and then Tsunami basically disbanded. People in Dragon Arelite will know the reference. This is what I fear. This is what I fear about Wolves of War. I don't think they are meant to be an alliance leader. To be bluntly speaking, I think Wolves of War is very fine as a number 2 guild, but they're going to run into the same issue that Tsunami ran into Ivory when Tsunami decided they were going to still try on their own in the Super Server merge. I just don't think it's a good. I don't think Wolves of War really should. They should not be expected to be an alliance leader, and if they're pigeon.
I'm just gonna pause and chime in here. I don't think there's anything wrong with Wolves of War being an alliance leader. I think Wolves of War is a great asset to any alliance, and I think he should give them a bit more respect. Wolves of War almost took the throne in one of the previous sieges. Very, very close. It was if it was a difference of like 1 or 2 seconds, they would have had the throne. They also had a very good performance against Dragon on Piquilo Rift, even being this out. I think saying Wars of War shouldn't be an alliance lead is then implying that they should be second and then have another stronger guild in that alliance, right? Because what else are you saying? So someone from 1 to 4 should be the lead of that alliance? I think that makes it way too powerful. Wars of War has a unique spot in which I think that they have weaknesses that can be exploited in GVG because they are very tank heavy, but they then come out on top of guilds such as Dragon or Infamy in ZVZ. If you imagine large-scale PvP in Arc Boss or Nebula, having a guild have more than 20 tanks and being able to provide a beefy frontline lets some guilds that would usually lose in small-scale skirmishes with like a very DPS-heavy lineup then, flourish and look much better. So that's why I say, like, whatever Wolves is ranked or whatever they're considered in terms of strength, they just go up when it comes to ZVZ. And I don't think they have a bad shot caller either. I think they have a good shot caller. So I'm not sure where Esper gets this from, and I don't understand the comparison to Tsunami. Tsunami also didn't play Dragon multiple times. It was just the one time, and Tsunami's, you know, collapse or closing up shop had maybe had some influence, but I think ultimately their guild leader Rady was just done with the game, and that's evident in the fact that he didn't continue playing or go join another guild. I think he just flat out just packed it up, and the rest of the Tsunami players, nobody wanted to step up and take over. So that's just what it is, and I don't think we create this comparison. And I think Walls of War does perfectly fine as an alliance lead, and have never shown anything otherwise that they would be dissatisfied with it. I would pin themselves in the corner with unsavvy politics. I mean, I can't really say much. I do know that there are guilds that don't like working with Walls of War, won't work with Walls of War, but that's the case for most of the guilds existing. Over time, a lot of guilds end up, accruing enemies. Just from, I think it makes the game a little bit more interesting. There's nothing that will get your members to log on, 65 out of 70 or more than when you face a guild that you have beef with, right? You kind of need that. That's what MMOs are about, right? So it is what it is. I don't think it pins you in a corner. It's just it's healthy for the game. But I'm gonna skip forward here. Talk about Jailed.
But if you look at Jailed, like I really think that partly why it seems like Guddle and McLovin, Jailed and Gravity get along is because they're very similar. And I think that Jailed has become like what Gravity was when Gravity was castle holder and alliance leader in Adrenaline after Helloing left. I think Jailed is high attendance. There's a lot of solid fighters. Both the original Jailed and Spin Car Static, formerly of TC. They love to fight in the sense they're very kindred spirit with Guddle. Recent war game results, they did beat Gravity in the war game. They also lost to Dragon in the war game. This is the same position as Wolves, honestly, and I'm basically tipping my hand where I think Gravity is. I think guilds rank 5 through 8 in Adrenaline are honestly no man's land. This is kind of like with the Ivory and
Okay, I'm just gonna pause it there. I think what he says, some of it is correct. I think Jailed and Gravity are very similar to each other. I would not consider this no man's land. Just recently, Dragon has been working with, I think he does go on to rate Gravity at rank 7, and I'm just going to talk about both Gravity and Jailed at the same time here, because I do agree that they're very similar in terms of having great fighters that can easily rank highly in ZVZ. I think when we saw the inter-server siege, when we were on Snowburn, Dragon was on Snowburn, and they played against Adrenaline. Lots of Jailed players showing up high on those rankings, Swingcar included. And when we were allied with them, playing against Exus, Jailed and Gravity looked great, very, very competitive. And I actually had VOD reviewed a lot of Jailed's sieges before coming to Adrenaline server, and I think when calls were made, Jailed players were very, very quick to move into position. I was very impressed, and that was me coming from a kind of point of view of trying to look at the flaws and weaknesses of Jailed to see if they would slip up anywhere, give opportunities. Surprisingly, they did quite well. Now, I will say this, right? I think they lack direction. So I was fortunate enough to have played with Jailed and Gravity in an alliance, and when I came in, they had some structure in place, but nobody that was like very confident enough to say like, I know the right way that we should do things. And the result was, Arc Boss, there was losses, right? Those losses to Wars Alliance multiple times. And Wars had just better strategy than Jailed and Gravity. I would be, privy to some of the, and I'm not going to go into details, but I would see some of the conversations talking about strategy. And I feel like there was just kind of a little bit of a loss as to, what was the main issues and how do we go about resolving it. Now, does that mean Jailed and Gravity are hopeless guilds? No, by no means. They have extremely talented players. They just don't have a unifying figure who is very, very experienced and knowledgeable about shot calling and leading PvP, how to do ZVZ, to guide them in the right direction. I think if they have a great figure to unite them and tell them, hey, do this and do this now, they will excel. So I don't think whatever alliance they're in is doomed, so to speak. You can find great short callers in some of the weaker guilds. I'm going to point to Villainous in this scenario. I think Blago is also great. I think pairing some of these guilds with someone who can then call the shots will benefit them a lot, and they can be very, very competitive. So there's that, and they show up great to open world PvP. So again, not No Man's Land because they have a good chance, and they have already picked up players from some of the guilds ranked higher than them just by virtue of being more available and actually having a great community. Shout out to the Gwen Chana players. You know, I think they're a funny group. I think they're enjoyable to talk to, and they seem to have fun. Whatever they're doing, and same for Geld. I think a lot of the players in there are just enjoying their time. I will say though, I'm sure it happens in all the guilds, Geld, Gravity, and the rest of them. There are going to be subsets of players who get very frustrated with losing, and complain and lash out and kind of can dampen some of the environmental atmosphere. I think Geld has dealt with this less, but then it did crop up a little bit after a few repeated losses. But I will say one thing I do notice from kind of the guild leader conversations is that you'll take an arc boss such as like Cordy, in which Dragon employed a strategy of kind of jumping off and saving contribution, and a lot of the guilds that then raised up a concern over Dragon's high contribution on the boss were not able to identify what Dragon was doing or what the best approach to tackling that would be, and that's just the failure from leadership as to strategizing and then also analyzing the subsequent like results and looking back at the footage and realizing that a lot of these conversations I was like, hey, did you guys actually watch the VOD? And they go, no. So I think it's just a failure in planning and then a failure in learning from the mistakes. And I've seen a positive result from Gravity after they started VOD reviewing some of the games that they had, and they saw that there was a lot of room to grow. And I think that's what these guilds ranked 5 to 8 should be doing. They should be learning from the losses that they sustain and then building on that. Because then all the guilds ranked 1 to 4 have been doing that for a longer period of time. I think it's kind of unfair to say, so to speak, that if you're a guild ranked 5 to 8, you should just pack up and leave every time, because then you will never make any growth. You're only going to be as good as the people that you compete against. If you run at any adversity, and this is the same thing in life, right? You go to the gym, you're not going to make those gains if you only stay with a comfortable weight, something that you can do easily, right? Or you pick up a new hobby or a task and you're not amazing at it instantly and you just drop it, right? I think Esper should kind of widen his horizons a little bit, pick up a team sport, IRL, and then start competing and seeing that sometimes you sustain losses and you talk to your team, hey, what can we do better? And you go back and compete. So that's all I think.
Time and unless, I mean, this supposedly super committee is meeting tonight, but changes need to happen fast. Otherwise, honestly, if I were running guilds 5 through 8, I'm questioning whether I have a future in adrenaline. I don't think it's good.
Well, that's why you're not running one of the guilds, Esper, and that's why you moved out. So
for my guild. The way the current dynamics are. If I'm basically the 5th through 8th seed, I'm seriously thinking, should I do what's best for my guild in the long run if I'm intending to play during Tier 3 in September 18th, Tier 3 gear release in September 18th and beyond?
I think Tier 3 is a completely different conversation. I think if guilds want to go farm up for T3, or they come out with new enhanced arc classes and there's things that you want to get from there, by all means go farm. But right now, what we're doing and what we're working on here has nothing to do with Tier 3, and the cooldowns reset anyways on the transfer, so I'm not sure why this is a conversation anyways. So Fit for poaching concerns. Yeah, I mean poaching concerns always the case for any guild. So no purgatory with Gerald though. I don't agree with that. So I'm gonna skip forward a little bit. Yeah, release. There we go.
It's kind of ironic because the Digi players in Hailstorm merged with Gravity, but released with this current massive merging with including shot callers and some of Hinge players. It kind of reminds me of how Hailstorm strengthened when they kind of gobbled up people. But it'll kind of like Hailstorm moving forward. They're now in no man's land of what do we do now. Released was supposed several weeks ago, last month. Everyone thought that Release was going to be one of the Alliance leaders, perhaps that had the ability to be the non-Dragon, non-Exodus Alliance leader headed to the Adrenaline Super Server, but it released fell off. Part of it is just attrition. They did lose a lot of players. Um, released as a guild. They greatly improved when they married with and Stellarite. I think helped a lot. Has some solid shot callers and complemented released very well. It remains to see how strong this release will be after their.
Well, a few days have gone by, and I think the release and RO merger led to a very strong guild. What I will say is, I think it's very interesting to talk about release losing players due to attrition. They won Stellarite, and Stellarite had very little competition. Nobody could really compete with them, and as a result, players got bored and then started quitting the game. Right, leading to the requirement of this merger to keep a sustained and healthy guild. What I will say is that I noticed that EsperC's does not draw any parallels when he should to guilds on Carnage server, right? If they do not have PvP or they don't have competition, they are going to lead to attrition, and not just like player count diminishing, but the skill level of the players there. When you do not go to play against competitive players, as soon as you run into them, you are going to struggle quite a bit, and your war games will not bridge that gap. One thing I will say is that players who get used to playing war games as their only form of PvP do not value their life as much and are too used to dying, running back, and doing as much damage as possible, which leads to bad habits forming, and they're very hard to break sometimes, right? But getting sidetracked a little bit, I think this was a good merger on the level of performance of players. I think the guild is quite strong. However, it's still to be seen how things can pan out. As with any merger, time is of the essence, and to see if it can work out long term. Especially when you have very kind of strong, skilled players putting together in the same spot. I think Dragon was beneficial. We picked up some TC players, Flex players, some Velocity, etc., and then original Dragon players, and that's like 4 different mergers in one, and it's worked out quite favorably. You have Exodus, which is a merge of tier players, some Hellowing, maybe a few supple here and there, and then the original Exodus players. I think maybe it's like 2, maybe 3 statics worth of original Exodus players still in there, but sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But I've seen good things from Released, and I great performance in Nebula and stuff. Not much more else to say. I don't know about the comparison to Hailstorm, but yeah. I'll move on. Snaked. Now, this is the interesting part about Snaked, and I do want to hear what he has to say, and then I'll give my own thoughts.
Number 9 is Snaked. So I compared them to the release of old, with a very, very high emphasis on micro. But I mean, I've said this about Snake before. I don't think they should have been an alliance leader. They need to pair themselves with a shot calling guild like they had like what the released dynamic. Like Snake needs to find their their blood feud versus Wolves. I don't know if Edston managed to successfully negotiate this away. I think this is well known that they don't get along. I'm not at liberty to discuss. I have serious concerns. There's a unique issue there in the grand scheme of things that I'm not at liberty to discuss. I will leave it to the committee to address this.
Okay, so I mean, what I would say is if Esper wasn't about to talk about it or isn't able to talk about it, he probably shouldn't have brought it up anyways, because then it's useless, right? I'll interact with this. I'll talk about it. So now we can see that Snaked has closed up shop, and they no longer exist. However, I don't think this is what Esper was referring to at the time. Now, I will go ahead and say that there was a belief by many players and guilds that Snaked was sacking their alliance because they wanted to work with Exodus, because they had ex-players who, were friends or worked together or something of the sort, and that Snaked just really wanted to be at Exodus. Now, regardless of any of that, one thing I will say, and this is just me being direct and upfront with Snaked and any of the guilds that do work with Snaked, I had concerns about Snake's numbers coming into PvP. They showed up big in Arc Boss, but they never really showed up to Nebula. This was reported by their ex-alliance partners. We had an instance in which there was a Nebula PvP where Exodus felt as though it was easier to push into Jail's alliance with Snaked than it was to push into Dragon's alliance, and this was a kind of hotly debated thing. And I was like, well, what was the numbers like, right? And it seemed as though Jailed and Gravity didn't actually know that Snake didn't show up, and so they had 3 people in VC. And I asked the representative from Snake, hey, how many people did you have, or did you guys go? And he said, oh, I'm not really sure. And I was like, well, did you guys use TLGM? And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, did you have an event for it? And they said no. So I was like, well, and then to be expected, right? And they had just had a war game right before Nebula, so they finished the war game against Spooky. Spooky showed up to Nebula, Snake did not, right? And I think it's very difficult to have kind of like a committee or these discussions with alliances or guilds when guilds are, one, not upfront about their turnout in numbers, not upfront about what events that they will show to and how often they'll show up to it. 3, I think if they have enough players around, because they had like 40 plus, close to 50 showing up minutes before an event and then last second not showing up, even though you said, I think that's just acting in bad faith. And it's not really something we can account for. And this is something that we address with the players and say, hey, no shame in it. If you can't do it or you're not going to be able to show up, just say that, right? Just say, I'm only going to bring 20 people, or I'm just not going to show up, right? So if you want my honest opinion, from Dragon's point of view, I'll say it openly. Dragon said that there was only one guild that we wouldn't work with, and that was Snaked. No disrespect to a lot of the players in the guild. I think they had a lot of talented players. I just think that some of the ways that Snaked conducted themselves was very true to the name, and I wouldn't, want to interact with guilds in which I don't know if they're going to show up. Even if I see them, 5 minutes ago, 50 players deep, I don't know if that's going to show up in the PvP, and I won't get any warning as to that. So that's my opinion on that, and we're just going to have to rebalance things knowing that. So moving on, splash damage.
Number 10 is splash damage. My comparison is privateers. I think part of this is because I'll give credit to splash damage. They're willing to give second chances to people, but they have some problematic members.
He talks about problematic members in Splash Damage. Switch Guild doesn't have problematic members. That being said, I don't actually know what's problematic about them or who they are, nor do I really care. My opinion on Splash Damage is that, again, they have skilled players, but they need someone to give them direction in PvP. They don't do too hot in GVG head-to-head. I don't necessarily know what their team comp looks like, but they have been amazing assets when working with them, when it was Dragon, Infamy, Splash Damage, and Blood Paradox. Splash Damage does great if their members can listen to someone that they believe in, but if you kind of just put them in a scenario with no direction or guidance, a lot of the players will kind of just do their own thing, and then they don't look as strong. So I'm not sure what their plan is come September 3rd, but my opinion of Splash Damage is that it's great to have them in Alliance and great to work with them. It's just you have to make sure that you corral them and put them in the right direction, and they will perform, right? And they're very honest. I'll say that, right? They're very honest about their numbers. My interaction with Shinya, even if I said, hey, I want to see 55 plus to Nebula, and I want to see your guild come very often, he'll straight up say, I can't bring that. I'm going to bring this amount of numbers. So, good interactions work with him. Very passionate guy, though. I will say that. Very passionate. Moving forward to Spooky.
11 is Spooky. My comparison is Corrupt. It's kind of I don't know how close Exodus was to Corrupt. I think they had a relationship back to Fear and Corrupt, but their current dynamic kind of reminds me of that. There's the infamous, I think, bubble blowers leaked the DMs of the former.
No, just drama that I don't quite care about. It's funny.
Numerous tier members in Spooky now, like Mr. Cantoni, I think they are married to Exodus.
Yeah, Spooky, it makes sense, right? Tier players were split up between Exodus and Spooky. They would like to continue working together. Their members are essentially in both communities, talking to each other, hanging out. I don't think it's fair to then split them up, even though that they would be willing to. Let me make this clear. They were willing to work in different alliances if it's for the sake of making these alliance system works, which is a testament to how committed each of the guilds are to this idea. However, in my opinion is that you shouldn't split players who are essentially in the same community anyways. And I think Spooky is a kind of dark horse. They have the right systems in place to improve at a rapid rate and become very, very competitive. Whatever ranking he puts them here at 11, they can shoot up very easily because they have good infrastructure in place to then improve. So I will say that. But right now they do lose fights that they shouldn't be losing, or maybe they don't have the players kind of formed and trained yet. Then Colt.
Paradox and Stellarite, I think, is quietly a solid guild, but they have issues with bleeding out members to poaching to the guilds higher on this list. I think they benefit significantly from Arelite Dragon on Stonemer.
Yeah, I mean, again, poaching happens to all the guilds. I will say Cult definitely is maybe more likely than some other guilds to lose some of their players to poaching. What I will say about Cult, though, I think the guild leader is someone that I have a lot of respect for. I think it's very, very intelligent. It's a shame that the guild doesn't, I mean, seemingly from the outside, doesn't listen to him as much. I think he has the right vision from my conversations with him as to how guilds should run or how alliances should run. I would shoot Cult as one of the guilds in which a stronger guild on paper that doesn't have good direction or leadership or shot calling should then kind of take a page from Colt's book is to kind of mentality and attitude from at least from the leadership standpoint and let them kind of drive things, which might seem counterintuitive. I think a lot of people let their egos get involved, look at things that don't necessarily matter as a judgment of if they should respect you or listen to you. Some guilds will go, your guild is weaker than ours. Why should we let you kind of drive the lines? But I think those things are ridiculous, and I think that stunts your ability to grow. I've always had the opinion that no matter what kind of walk of life you come from, what your experience level is, I don't think you should be snobby and turn your nose up at people because even though you might feel like you know it all, there's always something that you can learn surprisingly from someone else that you from where you least expect it. So again, I think Cult has a lot of potential. It's just need the players to kind of stop being stupid and start listening to their leadership and work on that because they have a good vision for how to improve and how to get better. So yeah, Unhinged. I'm surprised Unhinged is all the way down here. I think they did well when they were with Released and some of the what was it Released and and those guilds. But yeah, Unhinged. Yeah, they did fine. They need other guilds to bounce off of, and they need a guild to kind of give shot calling and leadership. And if the leadership says, "Hey, go in," they will go in, and they'll be a great asset to any alliance that they're with. But I don't have much to say about Unhinged, but I'll skip forward. Anyways, BP. Now, lots of respect to BP. BP showed up to Siege with 30 players, but my god, they were fantastic. If you needed them to hold a respawn, they held it down. They did not care about how many kills they got. What they did, they were completely focused on the alliance win, and they are some of the best people that you could work with. Highly, highly recommend because they don't ego, they don't care about their own personal whims. They're just there to be a great ally and team member. So much love to BP. I think Alex Sun is also a great guild leader. She deserves more respect than she gets. She's also great at managing alliances. I fall short on doing some of the secretarial stuff, but Alex Sun is amazing at doing like the spreadsheets and documents, and will go the extra length to make sure that people will succeed. And I think the people in BP are lucky to have her as a guild lead. I know they lost a significant amount of players to Carnage, and yeah, I think they're building back to full capacity. But that's what I feel about BP. I think some of the players are a bit weak on a skill level individually, so they might lose GVGs. But in terms of ZVZ, just like a community standpoint and having a guild that you can trust to lock down something or fulfill the role that they need to, BP has just been amazing to work with on Dragonland. So that's my take on it, and that's coming from someone. Admittedly, I wasn't jumping at the idea of working with BP because my perception was that BP would be. I think they had some people in that guild that used to talk, trash talk Dragon, and they probably might not be in there anymore, or weren't really the strongest amount of players. But I've been pleasantly surprised by BP while working with them. So that's my opinion. Villainous. They are who they are. Credit to Blago for keeping their identity. Yep. Great. Blago's great. Prep those GGs, Blago. great moments. I wish they republic their Siege VOD so I can watch it again. Great moments. But yeah, I think Villainous does great. I don't know why they're all the way down at 15, but stronger than this, and they're a great asset to have in an alliance. I think Exodus has spoken highly of Villainous as well. This guild should be way higher, so I don't know why he put them there.
Because they know what they are. I think Villainous truly is. I think they advertise themselves in the tournament as a semi hardcore guild. The longtime gaming community, a lot of people say that, but I think Villainous is one of the few that stuck to their guns and they know who they are.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let me skip forward. Sales. No, I have really no opinions on sales. Well, I have seen sales come to like number 1 on an arc boss, so maybe they know what they're doing when it comes to ZVZ, but I can't say for sure. But yeah. Let's see. This is the meat of it. This is what people came here for.
To my opinion, we're basically stuck with a two-party system now. It's just Exodus Alliance versus Dragon Alliance. I mean, as it stands on September 3rd, my top 4 guilds would be 1 Exodus, 2 Dragon, 3 whoever Exodus is allied with, and number 4 whoever Dragon is allied with. How this is bearing out? Look at the data. I mean, I'm not posting all the data, but yeah, I mean, you see these scoreboards. Like you look at these bosses, it's basically
One thing I'll say is that these are like cherry picked, and they're not even like fair comparisons. This is like the first time that Dragon actually performed well on a arc boss in a long time. I think this was the first time we actually came to top 5, and even then you can see, you know, Villainous all the way up there in sales. And that being said, they are with Exodus Alliance. Some of the strategies used by guilds in this arc boss were just completely terrible, right? You had Exodus having the left side of Cordy completely free. Of course, they were going to get free contribution. And then you had every other alliance trying to vie for control of the right side. And when they did do that, Exodus came in and wiped them out in one fell swoop, and then went back to their side. So of course you're not going to see them there. I don't think this has anything to do with the relative strength of the guilds. It's just, you know, if you're not going to play the game, or you're not going to actually like employ a good strategy, then it doesn't matter how strong you are, it doesn't matter what guilds you have, this is going to be a scoreboard. But again, that being said, this was the first time Dragon actually ended up on the scoreboard in a while. And then this is Grimtug. This is just like, I mean, Grimtug has changed like so many times as to which guild is at the top. This means nothing. And he also used a screenshot where it's not even halfway dead. So I have no idea what this was all about.
It's either Exodus Alliance or Dragon Alliance, and the other 2 alliances are getting shut out. And this goes to my final point. We need to make a third. How can we have 4 alliances if we can't even prove a non-Dragon,
Why are you hitting your table?
Exodus alliance works? We have to make a 3rd alliance work before people can start thinking about 4th alliance. This is what
I mean, I will say that I was of the belief that we would have 3 alliances, and I was just like, well, whichever guilds aren't willing to show up or be competitive, then tough. But I've seen actually good things from 4 guild alliance system. I will say that it works in relative to Arc Boss. I've seen each kind of alliance have a guild have their own fair share of control. That being said, you know, when you do have 4 alliances, there's not as much room to fight for, and you kind of take turns on which alliance is getting flanked from behind and losing their contribution or getting wiped. I think one of the recent arc bosses, Exodus was at top, and then near towards the end, they got like wiped out and flanked, and so lost almost all their contribution. And you know, the guild that kind of just comes in at the end, or third parties, is the beneficiary, or the alliance that does that. That can be any of them essentially. But Nebula does get a little bit skewed because it depends on which alliances show up or will CTA for it. Yeah, so there's that. There's change, working realignment, infamy walls, gravity guild. I think this is just, in my opinion, this is just makes C very overpowered. He puts Dragon and then 2, 3, 4, but he doesn't specify which guilds are there at all, which doesn't really make sense. And I don't think Esper is the best person to kind of design these alliances, because he doesn't know the intricacies between what guilds want to work with other guilds, what guilds excel in GVG but fall short in ZVZ, and then vice versa, as well as the composition of guilds in terms of what type of, do they have lots of DPS, do they have healthy amount of healers, do they have a lot of tanks and things like that. So a lot of thought has gone into kind of designing the alliances. Many hours spent, multiple days and meetings and conversations, and I think whatever result that we come to is the kind of hive mind of multiple talented people working together to make it, and they're constantly in flux and trying to be adjusted. So while I respect Esper trying to give his opinion on it and work on a realignment, I don't think he understands why certain things can't work. I mean, he just put like 3 of the guilds that are extremely active in open world PvP, as well as now Infamy is pushing for those events as well, all together. So I think he has no idea what he's doing, because this just ends up being that every other alliance gets booty blasted in like regular events, and then GVG, like Infamy holds their own very strong against like Dragon and many other guilds. Wars is the same way, and then like I don't know, Arc Boss, they also have great attendance, 60 plus to these events, and then Nebula, like this alliance would easily just win. Like, so again, has no idea what he's talking about. I think he made this at the time when he was in Gravity, and so wanted Gravity to have a good alliance to succeed. Gravity's doing just perfectly fine working with Dragon as well, having the highs, having the lows as well, where things are in flux. I think Gravity kind of lost out a little bit in Arc Boss, but gained in Nebula, so as it should be, right? And we're having back and forth PvP in open world where there's no one alliance completely dominating those events, right? Maybe Wolves is dominating a little bit, but I do.
The 3 and 4. Dragon's current alliance will have to be entirely redone. They have to get a new 2, 3, and 4. The third alliance to try to show a viable non-Dragon Exodus alliance, I think, has to be Wolves, Infamy, Gravity or Jailed, and then the fourth is some.
And I mean, this just like completely screws over guilds like BP and Cold and Villainous and things like that. So, just like there's no point, right? Like, what is the point of playing if you've just now alienated a bunch of guilds, and then those players stop playing the game or start quitting? Then you're like the king of nothing, essentially, right? I think it's fine to kind of promote the four alliance system and just rebalance the guilds as things are in flux and move it around to have it so everyone can prosper. And then come September the 3rd, when it's a 2 guild alliance system, then when the transfers are reset, we can talk about it again and have some of the guilds transfer out if they so wish, right? If that's best for their communities. So I think he does continue to run
this together and try to prove that a third alliance can work.
And I think we've done that already. We've seen Wars be extremely successful. I think the only alliance that kind of struggled a little bit was Jail's one. I have seen some more success from them, though, now that they have Infamy. And I think the Infamy and Jailed alliance is perfectly fine. I think they have splash damage with them as a third, and then maybe one other weaker guild, which might be Aurorus. But that's how it should be. You shouldn't have one alliance that has 4 very active and very strong guilds. I don't think that's a good way to balance it. But you do have to kind of gain in some place and lose in others. So I think it was positive to have Infamy here. I will say though that like my own members and Infamy's members are quite, really wish that they could rejoin again, but for the health of the server, this has been working fine. So a little bit agree with like the rebalancing, but a little bit disagree with like kind of having it only work with 3. And I think we've proven already, if you look at the recent siege, I don't think I've seen a more closer siege ever, right? Where 3 different alliances all had a good chance at winning the throne. Jailed and Gravity almost defended it. Wolves almost took it, and there was like a 1 second like usurp in which like Infamy and Dragon got it just but in the nick of time. If any small changes had happened, that might have not been the case. There's that. If Wolves had just kept killing Dragon players down the mid choke, which they were doing before, Dragon would have never came in, and Wolves would have never had a chance to take the throne, because it was actually Dragon farming the jailed players at Pillage 4, which enabled Wolves to actually take the throne in the first place, right? Otherwise, they would have never made that happen. And then same thing can be said where if Wars didn't started typing in world chat GG, then Dragon might not have actually tapped the throne and taken it. So there's a lot of what ifs, and I think it's unfair and disingenuous to say that this this just isn't working, or it's failed, or whatever. When you have scenarios like that, one of the most exciting sieges I've ever played. And same for Arc Boss. Like if we're all taking turns and different guilds on the scoreboard, almost every guild has enjoyed being in the top 5, either at the end and also midway through during the actual Arc Boss conflict. I don't know what S was talking about, but that's to say not everything's perfect. We don't make perfect alliances. We don't make any perfect anything, because we as humans are not perfect, right? We're imperfect people, so we're gonna learn, we're gonna grow on it, we're gonna change things. And I think that's the important part, right? To remember that every guild that's involved is working with a bunch of people that have the player's best interest in mind, and no one guild is trying to like dominate and ruin the fun for others. You can say Exodus and Dragon Alliances are prospering, but I think all the guilds that have like sorted in and worked with Exodus or worked with Dragon know that we kind of go above and beyond. We look at the structure, or the lack of thereof structure, that some of these guilds have, and we kind of bring them in the fold and have them start working the ways that we want to, at least from my end as well. Dragon myself has offered to kind of teach up and raise up other shot callers in the other guilds, and if they're not on Adrenaline, if they're not part of this kind of ecosystem, then they wouldn't benefit from that. And I think the kind of end result for any guild that decides to kind of go to a Snowburn or go to a Stellarite and just kind of wait out their days, slowly over time, you're going to lose players to attrition. They're just going to wonder, what's the point of playing? What's the point of being active? What's the point of practicing when there's no real competition? When you don't have to CTA for Ristone or Boonstone. You don't have to really go to an open world event. Your skill level dwindles, and so does your community eventually as they start to branch out to other games, right? Because you don't have a need to come to Arc Boss if your guild has it secured. So that's something to consider here. But overall, like that's my feelings towards Esper's video, and I hope that was enjoyable for you guys.